to build your profile. And on our matching app, which is all online, you can algorithmically match with companies and advisors, and hopefully you find your match. And then I'd like to recognize a team, Tony in marketing. This is a big initiative. I think there's still people going to be trickling in. So, but Tony in marketing, Dagan, our board chair Brian Fileski is here, and our CEO Sandy. So, it is really a team effort to make this happen. So, Barry Monroe, sorry, where is Barry? There you are. All right, so we're going to get started. So Nancy, thank you very much for spending this morning with us. You're probably one of the most prolific entrepreneurs I've ever interviewed. And we'll get into why later or shortly. But the first question, you've been in tech for 37 years, 3 companies later. You've crossed 800 million in revenue with smart technologies. So you've been at this for a long time, had lots of success, maybe some failure in between. Tell us about the gaps between 1987 when you started Smart to where you are today with Nialli. 2 minutes.
Well, yeah, a little bit facetious there, but everything kind of builds on everything that you've done before. So I feel that it really has been a progression through time as opposed to 3 distinct experiences. So Smart was just such an interesting experience over 25 years. And to be very clear, we were insolvent for 4 or 5 of those years. And it was through the good graces of Alberta Treasury branches that they left us in business, didn't make us bankrupt. And so we learned an awful lot about directness, balancing inflows and outflows and all of those good things. But, kind of keeping calm and carrying on would be, I think, the theme that I would think of in each of the startups.
Right. And all the companies that you've started, the common thread has been building a collaboration tool. Why collaboration tool? In every company, you did Smart, and then you did Nuriva, and now you're doing Nialli, which is the subject of this discussion. But why collaboration? Why is that so close to your heart?
Well, it's such an interesting and rich area to pursue. There's many different aspects of collaboration. If you take a look at the latest venture, Nialli, collaboration in construction is not something that comes to everybody's mind, but if you walk past a lot of the construction trailers, collaborative things are happening inside those trailers and back at the offices. There's just so many aspects to collaboration that I'm not sure that we'll ever be done with that. And by we, I mean the big collective we, the world.
Right, right. I know you don't like to talk about being a female business leader, but I think it bears some discussion because you got started in '87, where there was very few, if any, tech companies in the city. Talking about tech in Calgary was never mentioned in the same sentence. You have an MBA, you went and got your CPA, and then you went into tech. So you went like way off the beaten path. And I just want to maybe have you share with the audience what it was like as an entrepreneur and as a female business leader, the journey, the 37-year journey of growing, scaling, selling, and starting over again 3 times with 3 different companies.
Well, I think I have a little bit of an unusual path, and that's because it wasn't just me. It was me with my husband. And so that by itself was very supportive, very positive. There were a lot of occasions where everybody assumed that that Dave was in charge of everything, including me. And that's a big job. I don't think he could do that. He doesn't try at home, so that's a positive. But there's a lot of times in life, I think, where people can question you, they can challenge, they can disrespect you, and I would say you just kind of move on from there. I was very fortunate as I was graduating from university. One of my marketing profs asked to spend a little bit of time with me, and his message to me was all about being a woman in business at that particular time. I was graduating top in my class in a male-dominated environment, not just by a little bit, but I think our class was sort of 95, 96% men. And he told me that I should never learn to type. Big mistake. I should learn to type, as we all know. But he also said a number of things like, and don't ever get coffee for your boss. Well, I got coffee for my boss because he got coffee for me. And so I think when you create all of these artificial little rules and sort of fences around how you're going to behave, you're always looking for a slight and for difficulty. And I just chose to look away from that and not react. I will tell you that it did take 4 years for the Japanese to ever invite me to come to Japan. They invited Dave, and Dave would say, what do I need to say? What do I need to know? So it took them a little bit of time, and then they fully accepted me.
Well, congratulations on your perseverance. It's obviously paid off in droves. Um, as InterGen, we probably see a few hundred companies a year. And often we sometimes come to the conclusion that this companies or many of the companies we see they might be too early for the era that they're building their business in. You started digitally transforming the classroom in 87 and 88. And I would say digital transformation in K-12 was probably not something that anybody would have envisioned back in those days. How did you reconcile the fact that you were so early but still hung on for dear life as you believed in the vision of SMART?
Well, we did a couple of things. First of all, we didn't get any outside money. I'm sure if we had approached you, you would have been right in there with that group of 43 investors or potential investors who rejected us. For a long time, we kept those letters. We've thrown them away now, but we read them one last time. It was pretty funny. But, I don't think that that everyone deserves money when they ask for it, and that included us. And we did find that that because we didn't have all the money that we wanted, we spent it very carefully. We made the money that we put into SMART by selling an American company's product. We became the Canadian distributor, so a path not very often traveled, but an alternate investment strategy, and it did pay off. Intel came along in 1991. They saw what we were showing at Comdex and said, hey, our CEO, Andy Grove, has just been talking about the future, and we think we can deliver this in 3 years, and you're showing it today. So they made a $1.2 million investment in the company, and that plus the retained earnings from the distribution business and the retained earnings from SMART allowed us to grow to 800 million.
Right. Tell us about that. So 1.2 million is all you ever raised for SMART. And then you were reselling other manufacturers' hardware to generate cash flow to build SMART. Tell us a little bit about that stint in SMART's history.
Well, we learned an awful lot out of that experience as well. We'd never been in a distribution or resale business. We actually didn't really know a whole lot. We knew a little bit. We knew enough to get started. And we had so many people along the way kind of help us and guide us. And it wasn't as if they were saying, do this, do that, but they would ask us things. They would say, oh, I don't like what you're offering here. This is what I would like, And so active negotiation, challenge, and things like that helped us to learn. But we had an abiding set of principles that we lived by, and they were, really treat others as you would like to be treated. And so, your word is your bond. Do not shaft somebody in a business deal. If you have made a mistake, live with that and move on. And not every relationship that you enter into in business is going to last forever, but make it the best that you can while it lasts.
Right, right, right. Okay, jumping into Nialli, which is your current company, and that is it's a SaaS company with a hardware piece. Let's call it a TV, a big TV, big screen TV, that really amplifies and enables um, you to break down the silos inside of a construction services company. So from order to cash, you're helping streamline, project manage, and visualize the process. Why did you choose, again, you chose construction, laggard in technology, don't really care for big screens. They're paper and pen for the most part. Maybe now they're slightly different, but again, you chose a really hard nut to crack. Why why this company and why now?
Construction chose us. We did not go out and choose construction. So we had started Nareva. Nareva is still going strong now as well. We have about 180 people in the company. And we had a very general tool for sort of post-it notes. And a construction company based here in Canada, but out of one of their US offices said, hey, if you could customize this a little bit and do this, do that, that could really work for our kind of processes. So we had a small research group within Nareva at the time, and we took that research group and applied it fully to the question and the request from that construction company. Along the way, they educated us a lot to the methodology that they were adopting and helped us understand the opportunity in digitally transforming what was really a paper-based analog system at the time. So we took that process and moved it into the digital realm, and we spun that out into what is now Nialli.
Okay, very interesting genesis. There's a bunch of founders in the room, and many of them are on their path to customer number 30, 40, 50, whatever it is. Um, you're selling to the big construction companies, likely a long sales cycle, a complex sale, multiple decision makers. For the founders in the room, the investors in the room, what advice or lessons learned can you share about selling into big enterprise, selling a relatively new solution to big enterprise that are generally have a healthy level of skepticism when a new part is introduced to their operations?
Well, I guess there's a couple of different ways to look at it. You could think that it's an enterprise level sale, but none of our sales have started as enterprise level. They'll start at the building level. And very often the superintendent or people right on the job site will have the authority to make some choices. But beyond that, we have offered evaluations so they can try out the product, and we support them during those evaluations. They want to see what the product can do for them. Of course, having a demo first, a remote demo, then getting their hands on it, trying it out, having some help from us really goes a long way. And so you're not actually asking a big construction company to commit the whole company, you're committing to one building. And if you go just a little bit west of here at the Calgary Cancer Center, construction company took that risk on us and used the Nialli software to build the cancer center.
And how long did it take from the time you showed them the product or somebody showed them the product, the Nialli product, to the time they actually use it to build a cancer center?
I have no idea.
No idea.
I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay. Okay. I suspect long, but okay.
I'd like to know
Yeah.
every sale
Yeah.
infinitely, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have no idea.
Yeah. Okay. Um, going back to smart technologies, you've obviously understood and almost perfected the formula around going from very few employees to hundreds, if not thousands, in a relatively short period of time. And that to me is contingent upon the company being able to generate a sufficient number of sales every year to be able to pay for people. You referenced 800 million in revenue for smart technologies. How would you say, in hindsight, you've organized your go-to-market team from an org chart perspective and from maybe a discipline or best practice perspective that allows Nancy to just, you know, go off the starting line like a bullet?
Well, we serially invested in different areas. So when we first started Smart, almost all of the investment went into the product. We had to get that right and make sure that we had something of value to offer. And then we invested in marketing and sales kind of at the same time. And then we continued to invest. We did all of our international sales from a Calgary base initially. Then we started to invest internationally. We first invested in Europe and then later in Asia. So, it was kind of a series of growing up steps. It wasn't sort of linear. It wasn't even at all. And you're right, it was metered by what we could afford.
Right, right. Okay. I mean, a lot of companies have this dream, and a lot of investors benchmark companies as are they investable or not by this proverbial, can they be $100 million a year business? And you've taken that orders of magnitude to 800 million. For the people in the room, what type of thinking does it take from a CEO to be able to squash this proverbial $100 million benchmark and say that's nothing? Like the world is a lot bigger, and you've got to dream bigger. And if you can, then you can get there.
I always thought about it in terms of a greyhound race, and the greyhound never catches the rabbit in that racing metaphor. And I think business is a lot like that. And before you ever catch what you're striving for, set a new goal, set it out there, and you have to have a team that wants to race and win and learn. Not everybody likes every stage of a business. They really don't. Sort of the early stage, like 0 to maybe 50 million, is not the sweet spot for everyone. And then 50 to 200 isn't the sweet spot for everyone. So I think, you need the people to get on the racetrack at the time that works best for their skills. And you've kind of got to keep the team energized and going. And you have to win. I mean, you got to win along the way. You've got to win customers. You've got to win accolades, because that's the juice that keeps everybody excited.
Right. Richard is here in the front row seat, and he was responsible for international expansion. And so I'm curious to know from Richard, who actually was in the trenches, driving to 800 million in revenue, what your experience was like as a Canadian living abroad in very far away countries, bushwhacking a company that's not known in a foreign country to generate 50, 60 million a country. Like that's a tough ordeal. Like doing 50 million in Canada is a tough ordeal. How did you do it with no brand, 2, 3, 10 people, small team, no brand, maybe the language barrier? Like you had everything to go that could go against you was going against you, like lots of headwind.
When I joined Smart in 2009, it was well on its path. It was already generating several hundreds of millions of dollars. So I was not an employee at Smart in certainly the early stages, arguably the middle stages. I'm giggling inside. It's very evident, your greyhound metaphor is very evident when you went from 0 to 50 million as the first stage. I am presently with a company that generates $2 million a year, and it's fascinating and exciting and interesting and stressful. And what's on my mind as I attentively listen to Nancy's guidance here is the challenges that I face now, and how do we launch? So I've got more questions than answers right now. to go back to before I joined Smart, I was in Eastern Europe building Romania's first modern GSM cell phone company. And in that case, that would be an example where I was there on the ground when we went from zero to explosive growth over the course of a 2-year period. And it really rings true what Nancy has said, that certain people, certain professionals are equipped and maybe interested in certain phases of a company and maybe not so much in others. And not all of us really understand that. Not all of us really understand what part of that journey we are actually most interested in and best equipped to help guide. So I feel like I should be concluding my remark, but I'm not sure quite quite how. It will be in this. I will always appreciate Nancy's humanity. I was sent abroad over the Pacific Ocean, leaving a young family behind for a year at a time when Smart was navigating a contraction in its business. And the only person that I worked with at Smart that regularly wanted to know how I was Nancy. And I will always appreciate that greatly. So thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Awesome. Just continuing on international expansion, there's lots of companies in Canada and Calgary, certainly, that have this dream of being a global company. But going global is complicated. It's expensive. It could destroy your business. You know, a couple of wrong moves in a wrong country could just destroy your company. So it's risky, but it's got a lot of upside. How did you manage the risk and reward, especially in the early days where that risk was very real of destroying your business?
Yeah, very true. Well, first of all, we sold our products in the United States before we ever really spent any time and energy selling in Canada. And our thinking was this: if we were going to make it, we would make it there. If we were going to fail, we would fail there. Why make it here to just go there and fail? So we took that risk. We had a secret ingredient in our business, though, and that was a man named John Deutsch. And John was, well, first of all, a larger-than-life personality. You know, he coined expressions like the year of the rear. I just want to say, I said I never wanted to see that in print in an ad, but it motivated the salespeople to sell our rear projection systems. But he had other little pieces of advice, like the mind can absorb what the butt can endure. So, and we might be reaching that point as well, but he was our secret ingredient for expansion into the U.S. John had had a very long career in the tech industry in the U.S., and he joined us as our North American head of sales. And so we entered the United States with John, a West Coast salesperson, and a collection of manufacturers reps. I don't know if anybody knows what a rep firm does, but they get paid when they sell something. So that's a great expense mitigation strategy. And that really helped us enter. And as we, sort of progressed, our sales grew. We then started swapping out the manufacturers reps with our own people. So there's ways to kind of mitigate some of those expenses. And earlier on, I had said that we had managed our whole international business from a Calgary base before we ever started putting people into the field internationally.
Great. Going back to Nialli, how have you thought about the product in terms of developing it? I read a lot about you are very focused on having the customer ride shotgun with your product development team and product management team to help develop the product. But sometimes that pigeonholes you into developing a product that's sometimes very, very purpose built for a contractor or a certain type of contractor set, which means that you sort of aren't amenable to selling your product into the adjacent contractor set. So how have you been able to manage that part development roadmap to be applicable to as many relevant contractors and construction companies as possible?
Well, there are always checkpoints along the way. You want to learn, but you don't want to be enslaved. And so you want to take the information, but then go and learn as rapidly as you can. Is that standard? And so what intrigued us by the construction company that had approached us was they said, hey, your product could be made to replace this analog process. So great, here's the initial direction, the initial hook, and so they helped us with the definition of the product that we were building just as a research project. But we were validating behind the scenes, we were reading, we were learning, and sort of validating what they were saying. So we were doing exactly what you were cautioning against, going down a path that might be custom. And so we never, fortunately, had that type of conflict. I think that construction company, and I will name them because we are very appreciative of the relationship that we've had with them, and it's ongoing. It's PCL out of Edmonton, and we were first working with their office in Denver. But we showed them what we were working on, and they, to their credit, recognized that we needed to be a bigger commercial success than they could commit to. So if we did something that was totally custom for them, they would be carrying us and responsible for us forever. So they had a bigger mindset. We needed to
Yeah.
be broader based.
Right. Yeah. That's a great story. Pricing. A lot of entrepreneurs build the product because they know there's a need or they think there's a need, and then they arbitrarily put a price on it and see how the market responds. And sometimes many years into a business, I think they're still underpricing their product. How do you arrive at pricing your product appropriately for the value it delivers?
Salt in the wound. Salt in the wound. That's one of the questions I wanted to remove. But I will answer it. Yes, we underpriced our product, but there's also a little bit of market entry as well, and so we wanted to not have price a barrier. And we are going through price adjustments. We've already done one price adjustment. There's another one coming. So if anybody has our software, we're going to do a little grandfathering in there. But, we did underprice it. And but market entry, very important. We understand a little bit more about where we should be priced now. So I think pricing is a journey. It's
Right.
not one point in time.
Yeah. Okay. That's good input. And was that the case at Smart as well? Did you feel that you were underpriced or you're mispriced for the markets you were in at any point in the journey?
I would say not really.
Not
I
really,
think that
yeah.
we were pretty good.
Yeah.
And we did a couple of things on price. We pursued a Robin Hood strategy, and we're pretty proud of that strategy because we had a very differentiated price for corporate and for education. So education really took off when we were able to lower the price and make it so accessible to them.
Did corporate subsidize the education market?
Absolutely.
It did.
Yep.
Okay. And you're still able to do 800 million a year in revenue, even though you're selling lots of K-12 packages for a
Yes.
very low margin or maybe no margin.
No.
No.
No, we weren't selling it lower, no
Oh.
margin.
Oh,
In combo hardware, software business, you need to target somewhere in the 70 to 80% range. We weren't charging separately for our software at that point in time. And therefore we had, 200-300 software developers whose mouths had to be fed, and we weren't getting recurring revenue either. And so you need that level of margin to sustain all of those expenses that don't appear in your COGS line, and therefore your gross margin. They appear below the line, and you've got to fund them somehow. It's got to be through that higher level. And we were providing free upgrades to our education customers, so that has a cost.
Yeah, yeah, very good. I see Christine's in the crowd, and Christine's like X-smart. Do you have any input?
Oh, she's still smart.
She's still smart, yeah.
Just to be clear.
Sorry, Christine. Any input, and we want to share any experiences from a marketing perspective at Smart?
On the job. And I said, well, Christine, what I need right now is an assistant. And she goes, oh. And I said, does that mean you're interested? She said, yes, I could do that. And I said, be here at 1. I think that was like 10:30 or 11. And so Christine came in. It took all of a week for me to realize that she could do a whole lot more than be my assistant, but she graciously helped me for quite a while. So thank you. Christine.
And then Christine was in marketing.
She was.
And she probably has lots of war stories and stories from the trenches to tell about, I don't know when you joined, but you obviously were a big part of scaling the company. So it'd be interesting to get your point of view.
Shy of a microphone. I just wanted to say, so yes, I joined Smart Technologies in 1998. And one of the things that I really learned was Nancy was really willing to give young people big responsibility. It wasn't without oversight, but at the time, Nancy said, I think we should look into the architecture and design market. And don't you think that architects should be specifying our products in their new facilities? And she said, we just have never had anybody really look at that. So there I was in my early 20s, hit the road to the United States, attending some architectural trade shows and meeting with large architecture firms, and built out a plan and brought it back to Nancy. And here I thought that it was going to be for consideration at the executive level to fund the plan. There was a budget associated with it. And she said, okay, this looks good. You just run with it, Christine. And so from there, we ended up building out a whole vertical marketing campaign, or almost like a mini go-to-market. And so forever, I'm grateful for that kind of level of responsibility, that we worked very autonomously. Maybe when Nancy trusted you, you got to work very autonomously. But it was just fantastic from a very early stage in my career to be able to sort of lead a whole go-to-market. And then the other thing was, Nancy was always a big believer in reinvesting in marketing, and that whole idea that, the best product doesn't always win without brand awareness and without grassroots kind of marketing as well. And so it was something that, again, now I head up marketing for Blackline Safety here, marketing and product management, and I've had a long career in tech marketing. And I'm a proponent of reinvesting all those profits into marketing when there's product market fit. Super important to make sure that you have pedal to the metal in terms of your marketing spend, which is something that's often overlooked because it's easy to direct all of that profit back into the development of the product and the next generation of the product. So again, thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Okay, Nancy, back to you. How big do you think Nialli can get? Construction's massive, massive, massive. There's no ceiling, literally. But literally, how big do you think this can get? Can it be bigger than Smart or around that size? Or
It's got a lot of headroom. It really, really does. And, Nialli is a little bit like an iceberg. What you see today is only a portion of what we think it can become. And so there are other, let's call it product extensions that are being contemplated that we think can equally fuel the company. We've been very much in trial mode to this point, but we're just expanding our sales team with a further expansion planned early in the coming year. We pursue kind of a direct strategy and I say kind of because it's not fully direct. We have a fulfillment strategy, but we do most of the lead generation and lead development and sale. It just gets fulfilled otherwise. Here in North America, Canada is not an issue, but internationally, we will be looking to flesh out the distributors and other parties who represent us in a variety of different locales. So yeah, we see a lot of opportunity. And what's nice about the opportunity, it is a SaaS model, it's recurring revenue. It's a lot of it is project-based, but we do have a lot of enterprise level opportunities in the hopper as well.
right, right. Mogan Smed was here. I think you might know Mogan's. And he was my first guest in the Construction Tech series, and he's on a path to 360 million in revenue. Bear in mind, most of that is construction, implementation materials, labor supply revenue, not technology revenue. But nonetheless, for somebody to do 3, 4, 500 million a year in revenue, you need $1.5 billion, $2 billion in the hopper to be able to close. If you're closing at 33%, you need a lot of top of funnel, and that is a big number. And I'm just trying to get a sense for the purposes of the audience. How are you able to create so much fill and the year's short. You got summer, you got Christmas, you got Easter in between, you got other stuff going, spring break. We really only have 7 to 8 months of business operating time in a year. So it's really not 12, it's 8 months. So now you're really up against time to create lots and lots of top of funnel, which then needs to close. And in the following year, you got to close even more to keep growing. So how do you think through the math around that?
Well, it's not going to happen this year or next year. So that gives us a little bit of time. So it is something that has to build over time. But I actually think that this market is a little bit viral. You know how viruses spread, sort of COVID kind of insidiously worked its way. Well, what happens on a lot of construction sites is that the trades go and they work for other construction companies. And we've already had the experience where the trades have pulled us onto other construction sites because, hey, when I was working over there with another construction company, they use the Nialli software. Do you know that could really help us here? So there's some of that. And, we're getting to be a little bit known and proven, and we're just going to keep going at it. I agree, though, having that kind of opportunity in the hopper is enormous. It'll help us when we get some enterprise-wide adoptions, but some of our other product concepts are going to help us really scale this business as well.
Okay, very good. How can the InterGen community help you and your business and your team? Are you hiring? Is there people in the crowd or in our broader network that can do something for you to help your business or help your team?
Well, I think it's the whole Calgary community that has an opportunity together. Mogan's just reached out this last week and said, "Hey, I think we should know more about each other." So we're going to date for a little bit. I'm intrigued by what he is proposing. So we'll take a look. And it's possible that there are other companies here where we could do some similar things. It could be intriguing to think about how, as a group, there might be an opportunity to go to market together as well.
Right, right. I mentioned, InterGen really got set up to help connect senior business leaders with entrepreneurs that at some point in their journey need somebody to talk to professionally, personally, need a sounding board about whether their business is going in the right path or not, and somebody that can help them take the blinders off because you're in it 60 hours a week and you can't see the forest from the trees. Who have been people in your life since 87 when you started Smart that have been instrumental in being a part of your network when you needed somebody to go to and talk personal or professional?
Well, I guess the initial person was Ed Galvin. He was a longtime business associate and friend of my husband, Dave Martin. And Ed was on our board. We very much used him as a sounding board. And, I'm in some ways ashamed to admit, but there were times when Dave and I went for lunch with Ed where we wanted to shut it down. And it was just daunting. I don't know if anybody has faced insolvency, but that is not a positive experience. You're under enormous pressure every day. You're making choices about who you pay, agonizing over what's coming in the mail for cash. And so there were several times when we would go to lunch with Ed, and he was always very cheerful, and he would start with the same thing. What good is happening? And he would take the conversation back into a very positive realm, and we never ever mentioned to him, should we shut it down? And we'd walk away recommitted, re-energized. And so having somebody who's like that, and I'm not talking about somebody who is just blindly devoted to your every idea. He was challenging. He I think kept it very real for us, but at the same time kept our energy level up. So Ed certainly was that human for us. And I know that we worked with him, this fellow that I mentioned earlier, John Deutsch, but he actually was a very inspiring individual. He accomplished a huge amount in his career, but he did it having a lot of fun and building very strong relationships with people. And so just being around him had a very positive impact. And I would hope that however people build their businesses, they have an executive like John in it.
That's a great story. It's a great story. This is not part of the script, but I think it bears mentioning. Relax. It's easy question. At some point you got to sell and take your money off the table. And you did that with Smart. How did you come to the decision to go public versus just get acquired? And then you run a public company after.
Yeah, that was not our decision, actually. It was Intel's decision. Intel not just Intel, but Apex. Intel started the whole ball rolling in that direction. We were generating an enormous amount of cash in Smart. We had good margins. We had strong cost reduction. We were in control of our assembly operation. Sales were on a roll. We had global adoptions in many countries. So everything had a very positive spin to it. But Intel had invested in 1991. Their usual investment horizon was 3 to 5 years. By the time they got liquidity from Smart, and by the way, Smart was their single highest return investment that they ever made, except for the very brief, like months-long investment that they made in a transaction, and that wasn't an investment, that was a financial deal. But so a very long time, patient investment, and it's possible it was just so small. But for the $1.2 million that they put into the company, they took away $250 million from that investment. But they came to us and said, we want out, we want liquidity. And so that's when we did a search and found Apex. And, you know, finding
What is Apex?
Apex is private equity based out of London. And, you know, whatever, money comes with strings. It always does. And a lot of those strings they're not sort of our heartstrings, and our heartstrings are very much tied to doing the right thing for customers. We've never, ever done anything for money. Our mindset is do the right thing and money will follow if it should. And so Apex, very shortly after, I call it shortly, 2007 to 2010, wanted liquidity. And so that was the push to the IPO.
Okay, so Apex were an investor for 3 years.
Apex
Okay.
bought out a portion of the Intel shares, yes.
I see. I see. I mean, hardware is not cheap, and building a good software platform and continuing to improve it is not cheap either. Were you tempted to raise money beyond Intel at some point in the Smart journey to keep well capitalized to execute a very, very ambitious plan?
No, not at all. Because once we got over a certain threshold, and it was probably in the range of, well, it's more specific than that. The year that we hit 86 million of revenue, it was just like, whoa, where did all this cash come from? And we didn't need it, and we didn't want it, and so we liked how things were working with just Intel and Dave and me.
Right, right. But Intel could have got liquidity if you sold to somebody that looked at your business and said, we can buy that business and grow it. Why did you choose to go public versus just get acquired?
Nobody wanted to acquire us.
Hmm.
Nobody did. We had a couple of people come and kick the tires, and then they rejected us. And we were nicely along the way. We're 100+ million. And instead, they chose to buy one of our competitors, a lesser company. I'll name names. It was Steelcase, and they acquired Polyvision. And they thought that they could grow the competitor, who would obviously be far less money. We never did get to a money discussion stage with them, but they thought that they would be able to grow that business and beat us. And in the later years, they did say, wrong strategy.
Yeah, yeah.
They didn't come
Yeah.
close.
Right,
No.
right. What are the biggest things you've learned on your entrepreneurial journey, running a very small startup in 87 to running a big, sizable public company to now doing Nialli?
You have to love the work. And you know, it's not about position. It's not about, it's actually never about you, the individual. It's about the work. It's about what you can do for your customers. So you have to love what you do. You have to love the product. You have to love customer base. You have to love your channel. You have to really want to do all the right things, all the good things for them.
Right, right. Awesome. We have some viewers online and obviously people in the room, and I think they might have some questions. So if we can go online, please, and solicit some questions if we have any. Not yet? Okay. Any questions in the room?
Hi,
Hi.
and thanks for giving me the time to ask a question. You mentioned earlier that you had a meeting with one of your professors and gave you advice about the kind of businesswoman you should be. What kind of advice would you give to me? I just graduated university last year from Mount Royal University, and I'm pursuing a social media marketing company for myself. And I also tutor as well with my best friend. So what would you say to me?
Well, I would say a couple of things.
Okay.
First of all, everything is going to work out. You just
Okay.
get up every single day, put one foot in front of the other, do your best. And it's a long-term thing. I remember a piece of advice that I got that just enraged me as person finishing my MBA. I had to get a business plan reviewed by a banker, and the banker said to me, "You're going to need to get older." And I'm thinking, oh, that's a little ways off. But there's a lot of wisdom in that actual piece of advice, because you're not just sitting in a chair getting older, you're learning. You're becoming a different, more skilled person with a broader perspective. And that really is where the value comes in. So nothing is beneath you. Do it all. Somebody offers you some advice, take it in, see how it works for you. Do everything.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Thanks for the question. Any more questions? Oh, okay. I'll go here and then to Ian.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Just got to Calgary for the platform incubator program. I run a early stage startup. We're building an AI hiring assistant for hiring managers in the construction industry, and starting to realize that the most precious resource for a founder isn't money, but it's time. And talking about meetings, and meetings can run on, and you're getting pulled into a lot. How do you efficiently run meetings with the precious time at your hands as CEO? How do you run your meetings, and what best practices can you share?
Two things. Have an agenda and share information in advance. I don't like to come into meetings and just have to consider things on the spot. I find I feel disrespectful if I don't do the pre-read, and I'd rather cancel a meeting than have somebody have to spoon feed me in a meeting. So get an agenda, tell people what you want to talk about, and share information in advance.
Hi, Nancy. Ian with KPMG. I'm just curious about the tech ecosystem in the early days. What was it like in Calgary? And then were there other companies that you looked at, were inspired by, worked with? And what was it like pioneering in those early days?
Well, it's really funny. I'm kind of, I want to cringe right now. I want to go into almost a fetal position. That was that one event, and it was really high tech. It really was. And they were mentioning, there was a presentation, everybody was standing around. It might have been Christmas or something. And they were standing around sort of lauding all of these, Calgary tech companies that were going forth and doing great things. And they didn't mention smart. And by that time, we were probably somewhere between 50 and 100 million. And I remember somebody said, hey, smart technologies. And the person at the podium said, well, they're a quasi-technology company. And so I'm going, oops, quasi-technology. I guess it was because, the interactive whiteboard is kind of a low-level tool, or maybe a whiteboard's a low-level tool, but I kind of slunk out of there afterwards and I said, really, are we just so on the fringe of this? We're not really considered. But if you think about it, Calgary had a nice technology hub in the telecoms area at the time, sort of anchored by Nortel. And so if you think about the spin-offs and all of the funding that was going into those telecom kind of companies, I think that's where people's mindset was at the time. What I see today is just a diversity. Everything goes. We've got everything here in Calgary. It's a much more broad-based opportunity, I would say, for people, first of all, to find work, but second of all, to find opportunity in the market.
Any more questions online? No questions?
Help that construction on 9th Avenue get completed faster.
Well, they'd have to go back and start over with our software.
Okay, awesome. Well, Nancy, it's been a pleasure to host you this morning, and thank you for your time on behalf of everybody here. It's been a very thrilling and educational opportunity to spend some time with you learning about your 37-year career in tech. Before we depart, thank you very much for coming. We've got a couple things. I just want to thank our founding funders who make it possible for InterGen to be in business. There's a slide. So those are all the organizations that had our back in the early days and invested in us when we were an idea on a piece of paper and are still around today. So thank you to them. And then for those of you that are interested in industrial automation and venture capital, we have an event December the 4th at the Hyatt from 5 to 7:30. It's our Wine Wednesday. And we look forward to seeing you there. Registration details are on our website. So thank you very much. And this will continue next year, January. So see you in January. Thank you very much.